Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the latest in Thrive's webinar series. Today, as you can see, we're going to concentrate on men's mental health and well-being. And I'm pleased to introduce our panelists today, who've very kindly given up their time to join us. We will be with you for about an hour today. So for those of you who've joined our webinars before, you'll know that we have a question and answer function within the webinar, which is where you can put in your questions for us to try and answer. And we'll try and do that towards the end of the webinar. We may not be able to answer all of your questions, but we'll try and get through as many as we can. So please make use of that. Just to say, as we've mentioned many times before, we're not able to give individual advice. And if you are concerned about something, then please do go and speak to your GP. We'll be giving you lots of different resources today. So hopefully there'll be some things of interest. Our panelists today come from a variety of different backgrounds, and each have an interest in males and mental health, and support men with their mental well-being in the different sectors that we all currently work in. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Adam Huxley. I'm a consultant clinical forensic psychologist, and I've worked in a variety of different settings over the course of my career. So mainly clinical roles within the National Health Service and charity organisations, as well as the private sector. And of course, as part of that, I've seen many men over the course of my career who've struggled with their mental well-being. And myself and my co-founder, Andreas Fonseca, who's a consultant psychiatrist, founded Thrive in 2012. We wanted to bring talking therapies, psychological therapies to people efficiently and simply, and make it accessible to people without having to go through many barriers. And I think we've been pretty successful at that up to this date. I'd like to introduce Daniel to you, who, if you've joined our previous webinars, will be a familiar face. Daniel, would you mind just running through your background?
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Brothers in Arms, which we launched in 2016 as Scotland's first men's mental health. We're now a charity, but it was a website, mainly because at the time there was not anything that was available to men in Scotland around men and mental health. It's changed dramatically since then in Scotland. There's lots of groups and organisations that have now started to fill that gap. And we describe ourselves as really as a 21st century charity for the 21st century man in Scotland. And our relationship with Thrive is that we tend to use digital technology as a means for men to self-manage their own mental health, as a way to prevent them really reaching crisis and not taking their own lives. We want to get them right at the beginning to start working on themselves as a way to manage their well-being and become the same way. I always use the analogy, and Lloyd will probably is work on your mental health the way you do your physical health. So there we go. Or I am somebody with lived experience, and I've been I have post-traumatic stress disorder, so I've got experience of my own mental health issues, which has helped me, I think, in trying to connect with the kind of men that are using the charity.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Lloyd, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Not a problem at all, and thank you very much for the invite. And just want to say, before I introduce myself, a huge thank you to everybody for turning up today and giving the time and effort and the space for us all to speak openly about mental health. I think it's so important, and I think that's the only way we are going to change how we look at mental health across the board and change the stigma. And I know it is already changing, but hopefully we can eradicate it with the more support and the more conversations we have like this. So yeah, my name is Lloyd Ashley, professional rugby player for the Ospreys in South Wales. Fortunately, I've been a professional rugby player for the last 10 years, and probably the last 4 or 5 years especially, I've taken a keen interest in mental health. I've seen players over the years struggle through injuries, careers getting cut short, not dealing with selection and selection issues very well, lots of different things around rugby. And then having the conversations of how do you feel about it? Are you okay? To players, and first straight up, yeah, I'm fine. Don't want to speak about it, brush it off. And then seeing players a couple of years down the line still struggling with these things, and I started to think to myself, this isn't right the way we're doing things. We're not dealing with these issues. We're not giving people a safe space to speak, and we're also not understanding what's going on with men. So at that point, I went to do an introduction to counselling course. I become an ambassador for a Welsh mental illness charity called Havel, who I'm still a young person's ambassador for now. And recently I've just opened my own company called Living Well with Lloyd Ashley. So if any of you are on Instagram, please feel free to go across and follow Living Well with Lloyd Ashley. It like we were just speaking about, it's probably, Dan mentioned a bit of a different way of looking at mental health when he started Brothers in Arms. Same from my point of view. I've got a lot of current athletes, former athletes, speaking about why they think it's so important that we do speak about mental health, and why they have decided that they're comfortable speaking about it now, where they probably haven't been comfortable before. So lots of things going on there. And I'm also lead for mental health and well-being in the WRPA, which is the Welsh Rugby Players Association. So hopefully leading the change in Wales so the professional athletes across the board change the way we look at mental health, and also put a lot of support systems in place that we haven't had up until now. Sorry for the long introduction, but that's a couple of things that are going on for me anyway.
That's great. Thank you, Lloyd. Yeah, I think we'll probably sort of address a number of key themes today. I think, stigma is something which comes up quite a lot when we talk about men and discussions around their mental well-being. I guess the purpose of today really is to start the conversation and to support people to carry on the conversation after this webinar. So I think it's a sort of collective hope of ours that if you are struggling with the way that you're feeling at the moment, you speak to somebody about it. It's absolutely okay for you to go and seek support from somebody like your GP or a family and friend. And hopefully towards the end, we'll be able to signpost you to a number of organizations that might be able to support you. Okay, so we've got some questions that have been sent in ahead of time, which we wanted to try and tackle. But equally, we'd love to hear from you if you're watching at home. It says there, ask us anything. We'll do our best to get round to the questions at the end. So if there's something that you feel we might be able to help answer, then please put it in. If you just want to listen, that's fine as well. So this is a question that was a pretty typical one, actually, that was sent in ahead of time. For those of you that can't see that, it's a question which I'll read out. I live by myself and I'm finding it very difficult not being able to go out and see friends or family whilst in lockdown. I don't know where to turn to for support. So I think certainly what we've seen from our support of people is that this is a really, really common experience that people are having at the moment. Feeling isolated generally because of what's going on in the world at the moment and the restrictions that are being placed on our mobility. So I think it's absolutely understandable that people might be struggling a little bit with not seeing their friends or family. I guess there is some good news that's not too far away with an end date in terms of the lockdown. And I'm sure you've all seen the advice from the Prime Minister about restrictions being lifted over the Christmas period. So I take a lot of comfort in that, really, knowing that there is an end point to this, and that we will have an opportunity to see our friends and family. Before I come to Lloyd and Dan, I'll just sort of share with you what we've learned from other people, really, which has been really helpful to know in terms of providing a service. A lot of people have told us that they make use of technology when they're not able to go and see their families and friends. So in the same way that we're able to talk to you today, people have been using technology to stay connected to family and friends. So I think there's been a huge increase generally in terms of use of FaceTime and use of Skype and Zoom and other mediums of communication. And that's definitely something that we'd sort of suggest, that even if you're not able to see people, try and do things like this. Just take some time out where you plan to maybe call one another and check in with one another. If you can see people, then by use of something like Zoom or FaceTime, then do that as well. But we acknowledge it's difficult. It's difficult to sort of have that adjustment in your life and maybe stop doing the things that you used to like to do. And we're of course approaching a time when being with family and friends is really important. And maybe it won't be the same as it has been previously, but thankfully we'll still be able to see some of our friends and some of our family. Dan, any comments on this one?
Yeah, I for me, we've seen, and I would advocate. I'm a big supporter of men's peer support groups. So you've got like Andy Mann's Club, you've got Mind the Men in Scotland, and obviously when lockdown hit them, they had to think really swiftly on their feet, because what they do is have non-clinical environments that men can come together and once a week and just talk, you know, and support each other and talk about what's occupying them that week. And I think they're great environments, and we're piloting our own called the Brunch Club, which I'm hoping some of the guys are watching. And I think what we found is what these guys had to do was then use Zoom to do virtual peer support groups. Yeah. So, you know, for me, I think that if as a guy who is maybe alone, you know, for whatever reason, then I think get in contact. If you go on our help page, you will see there's a section for men's peer support groups. We've got the links for Andy Mann's Club, for Mind the Men. There's one called Human, which operates throughout England and has one in Edinburgh. But I think they at least are a way of keeping that connection going. So that's probably what I would advocate. It's funny. One of the situations that we got with the Brunch Club was one guy who came along and who working away in lockdown and was lonely. So for him to come along to the peer support group was a way of reaching out and making contact. And it's something for me, I call it brothers hiding in plain sight. You know, we always have this idea that there's only a certain amount of people, especially men, who are lonely or who are not able to, who need help, especially when it comes to mental health. For me, I'm absolutely, you know, one of these guys that came along, worked in a really great job. You know, you would see in all intents and purposes on the outside, he looked normal as a guy, but inside, because of this situation, was suffering. So the idea that he could come along to, whether virtually or in person, to a peer support group was a great help for him. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think you're right. So maybe the physical space of actually meeting people has been taken away from us right now. But I think you're right. A lot of organizations are moving online. So the meetings are still happening. They just happen to be virtual rather than in a town hall or a church.
I think it's worth adding, though, that the new government advice is that these peer groups can actually as well as virtually, can actually happen physically as well. So I think that's a great, they've been seen as something that's essential I think most of these places, and again, if you go onto our help page, you'll see the links for them, are doing their own are able to do the physical ones as well.
Yeah, I think we've had a couple of questions already about if we can post links to some of the organizations that we've been mentioning. Yes, if you check out our Twitter feed afterwards, we'll be putting some links in there, and I'm sure, Lloyd, you'll be putting some links on your Instagram account, and you, Dan. Lloyd, any comments about this question?
This is something we battled with hugely during the first lockdown. We're very lucky as professional athletes that we were, after the first lockdown, we're allowed to actually start sport for us back up. But there's a lot of young players in our squad, and a lot of them live alone. And the different things we did was put in training online, so everybody would turn their Zoom on to train. Do a little bit different. Obviously, like most other people, we did the quizzes online. But some of us are extroverts and get a lot of energy from being around people, and that is, we sometimes have to be honest as well. That sometimes is hard to get when we're not used to being online. I've got a schools program that runs in comprehensive schools, and I've run that sometimes in school and then sometimes now, because of everything going on, virtually. And the youngsters don't seem any different online as they do in person. They're very comfortable with being online. I've also got other things where I've run online podcasts where they've been live. And then a lot of men are saying, older, who are used to physical presence all the time, are saying they're finding it hard to they're worried about their technology. They don't know how to use it. So the uncomfortableness of not understanding technology is having an effect on enjoying the actual situation. I do think it's a huge thing the government is moving to letting these classes and support groups come back. I'm a big advocate for things like Andy's Man Clubs, men's sheds, lots of others. Like I've seen Brothers in Arms before, but found out more about it today from Dan. I think these things are fantastic, and I think the only thing we can do is carry on creating comfortable spaces for men to speak. And even if that does mean changing times of putting some things virtually online, but I think a lot of us who are so used to having physical presence around us, it is hard to adapt, and it is different. So we can't get away from the fact, even though there's so much going on and so many brilliant support systems in place, like we probably couldn't get this panel together if this was face to face. We're talking from Wales, Scotland, in England. We couldn't get this panel together. So it's fantastic what we can do now, technology-wise. But also, I'm sure there's people who might have turned up to a live audience event today, if we'd managed to put one on, who wouldn't feel comfortable turning online and get the same from it. So we do have to balance up, but I do think there's some fantastic resources, and I do think that we're starting to use the benefits of online a little bit more as well. And I do hope that for anybody living by themselves, I do think if you can be physically active, get out, make the most of your well-being time, even if you might not actually have a full conversation with somebody, but just seeing people around, a nod of the head, morning and afternoon, just even those brief bits of conversation do actually fill a small bit of that void. And I'm not saying it gives you exactly the same as being able to go and see friends or family, but it's definitely better than not having anything. So I think that even getting out, being physically active, get those endorphins going, and seeing other people does make you realize that there is also other people having to go out for walks on their own as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lloyd. Yeah, I guess this is also a reminder, isn't it, to just not assume that everybody's coping particularly well. And it's a reminder for us to check in with our own family and friends. And, we'll be talking about this, I think, a bit later on, but, it's easy to sort of lose contact when we're not seeing people regularly. So just being mindful of the fact that, we need to make an effort to keep connected to people, even if we're not with them right now. Because I think that can be a really good source of support in itself. Okay, again, this is a really common question that we get asked. So for those of you that can't see it, my partner has been really struggling with his mental health recently, but won't go and get help. What can I do to support him? Dan, let's come to you first on that one. This must be a really familiar question for you.
It is in the sense that I think if we go back to the sort of beginning of Brothers in Arms, when we in Scotland, when we were looking at launching something that was for men, a lot of the, I don't know if negative feedback, there was a lot of feedback that around the fact that because it was for men, that somehow that would alienate women. And really, it was actually about a response to the statistics of that 75% of all suicide is male in the UK. And funny enough, I was saying to the guys earlier, in Scotland, we just had our suicide statistics in for Scotland for 2019, and they've gone up again. Mm. And what's interesting is the rate is still the same. So it's still around between 70 and 75% of suicide is male. So, and that tends to be across the UK, tends to be global. And what I found, and in reaction to this question is when we launched the social media, especially the Facebook page, what was brilliant, and to this day is still the same narrative, is that the vast majority of people that jumped on the Facebook page was, guess what? Women who's pretty much the narrative, pretty much the question, pretty much what they were saying is, thank God, we really need this just now. We're really glad we've got something. As one woman said to me, I've now got something that I can point my partner, my guy, towards, because I'm telling him to go to the GP and he's ignoring me. But now I've got something that's a safe space for him that I can point him towards, and he can have a look at that in private, in his own time. Doesn't have to talk about it if he doesn't want to. And that's been the reaction to this day. In fact, the sisters, as I call them, without the sisters, as a charity, we would not be anywhere where we are. I mean, whether it comes to fundraising, whether it comes to creating awareness around the website, whether it's getting guys to use the digital technology, it tends to be more often that women or partners and who tend to push this. And so in answer to your question, for me, it's tell them to go to Brothers in Arms. And it's funny, because we use digital technology. I mean, very much the narrative that we get when it comes to digital technology. And I can read it here is a couple of sort of the responses that we got was that, one guy got in touch, a guy called Kevin, and he said he suffered from stress and anxiety. And he said, I was embarrassed to talk to my friends, but my partner found your charity and downloaded the Brothers Thrive app onto my phone. And he said, I was really skeptical about using it, but now I've started using your app, loving it. And he's even tried doing the meditation module. And then we got another one from Sarah, who again, a partner was going through some difficulties. And again, the narrative was that she downloaded the app for him and he started using it. And that tends to be, we have about a 60-40%. We have about 60% men to 40% women who download the app. And a large part of that, the women that download the app are downloading it for a guy, whether it be their husband, their partner, their son, or a male that they within their group. And thank God for that. I think if we're going to tackle this huge male suicide situation, we're going to do it with the sisters. They're going to be the ones that enable us to reach out. And very often, women are very, very much very attuned, as we know, to emotions and to people, men especially, that they know, whether they're living with one, married to one, or one that they're working with. So they're our greatest advocates, I think. So long story short, download the app for him.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. We've got a couple of people who put their hand up. If you just put your question into the Q&A box, we'll be able to see it. Thanks. Lloyd, I get just really interested on your view on this one. I guess there's a couple of things here. I mean, we are talking about males and the way that they seek support with something that is difficult to ask for support for, their mental well-being. Have you seen a shift, Lloyd, in relation to men feeling a bit more compelled, or it feeling easier for them to reach out for support, or do you think it's still really quite difficult to men to open up and acknowledge they've got a problem?
First of all, on the question, I just think it's fantastic that it's coming from my partner has really been struggling, and like, what can I do to support him? You're there. Like, that is fantastic. You don't realize how powerful that is. And I can't imagine what it's like as a partner seeing your husband, loved one, whatever, struggling. But fantastic to know that he's got you there, and that is a huge benefit. I've definitely seen a change over the last couple of years. There's definitely been a change. The stigma's coming down. I do, and I have seen it in rugby. I remember launching the company and thinking, oh my God, the boys are going to really rip into me about this because of the old school stigma, the worries there. And then I come into training, and I probably have 50 positive comments, one negative comment, and probably years gone by, that probably would have been close to the other way around. So yeah, there's been a huge shift. Do I think the stigma's gone? No. Do I think it's still hard for men to access help and be open about accessing help? Yes. And I think that's why we need to be careful of not trying to make it one size fits all, putting lots of different options out there for men. Whether it's peer support groups, whether it's counseling, whether it's going to see a psychiatrist, whether it's just having a small conversation, whether it's going for a coffee with another friend. There needs to be lots of different options, whether it's taking up physical activity for the first time. So you look at it from a well-being point of view, not just a mental health point of view. I do think there's got to be so many things different in place, but I've definitely seen a huge shift in it. And I think the more conversations we can have like this, the more things we can put out online, the more conversations we can have with people across the world in all different environments, the easier we are going to make it for men to access this help. And also there's so much support there available, and it's really hard to access for people in crisis, but there is support there. I think we need to put more support in place for preventative measures, for the fact of before even people have even worried about their mental health or had something going on, we're already checking in, we're already speaking about it, because we shouldn't have to leave somebody go to crisis and really need the support before we offer support. And that's a conversation I'm having in rugby now. And one of the boys said to me the other day, and it was a very valid point, and it's something that I'm finding hard to break down, and a lot of people are, that we're willing to speak about mental health before we've had problems now, which is fantastic. We're starting to say, like, I've started my page, I've got loads of people coming on. I've got people on there who spoke about who've been through crisis and come out the other end. But how do we bridge the gap where we speak about our mental health all the time? So when we've maybe at the start of a problem, in the middle of a problem, at the end of a problem, we're still able to speak about it, and we're checking in with people all the time. And I think the more safe places we can create, the Brothers in Arms, the Andy's Man Clubs, the Mentalities, the Men Walk and Talk groups, the Dads and Lads walking groups, the more things that we can do like that, I do think that it'll carry on showing men that it's fine to access support, and we might look at it differently. We're not even accessing support, we're doing something that we want to do, something that makes us feel better, and it's a different way of looking at it. And I do still think as men, we think if we're seeking support, we're either weak or we're selfish, but it's not at all. You get a better person, and the strongest people, it's not, like, I love the saying, it's not weak to speak. And it's definitely not. The toughest of men are the ones who are willing to have the conversation when either when their back's against the wall or even before their back's against the wall, and they're willing to put their neck on the line and be there and support somebody else. And that's the most empowering thing we can do as men.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as you're talking there, Lloyd, I'm just sort of reminding myself about what we hear for people who have taken the leap of faith to reach out and get support. And, you know, it's almost unanimous that the response is, it was never as bad as I thought it was going to be. And all this sort of fear and uncertainty about what support's going to look like quickly dissipates when people start the process. So I think it's absolutely natural to feel a bit unsure about what it's like to go and speak to your GP or a mental health care professional or even a friend. But I think just going through that process is therapeutic in itself.
It is now. Yeah.
Speaking with someone and finding that actually maybe you're not the only person who's going through this right now, or actually there is support for you in some way, some shape or form, no matter where you are in the UK, just can be really liberating. So I think if anybody's listening or watching this and they've been unsure about whether or not they should seek support, our advice is take the risk. Just reach out and see if it's something that you can engage in.
Yeah, but I do think, you know, for the partners, you know, from our point of view, that they have been fantastic advocates, and not just about Brothers in Arms in the fact that they're trying to support, you know, men with their mental health. So
yeah, I think, I mean, there are lots of support groups for family members who are affected by these sorts of difficulties. So you can get help in your own right if you're a carer or a brother or a sister, a father, a mother, partner. So I think it's pretty much what we've said, really. It's about supporting somebody in the right way. That might be signposting them to the service. It might just be a practical piece of support, like making sure they can get to a GP appointment by giving them a lift.
Yeah.
Different for different people. And I think if somebody's not comfortable talking right now, maybe there's a different way you can support them. Okay, I guess this question is something we kind of touched on a little bit.
yeah,
I'm worried about opening up about my mental health struggles because I think I'll be judged. So there's a question for us there, which we kind of touched on a little bit there. Do we still think there's a stigma? Lloyd, you kind of commented on the change. That's a very positive one, but it kind of still remains. And I wanted to ask you, Lloyd, as a sort of professional sportsman, do you think there's a bit of a difference in the way that people perceive their physical well-being compared to their mental well-being? I think about my very limited time in sports, and it was almost a badge of honor to get injured physically, and you'd have no problem showing everybody a scar or no problem at all in telling somebody how many stitches you have. So I'm just interested in your experience as a professional sportsman, Lloyd.
Yeah, I'll break a couple of those down. It's funny, the physical to mental health. I've got a thing on my Instagram page called 4 Questions With. I ask athletes 4 questions: career highlight, why do they think it's important to speak about mental health? Is physical health as important as mental health? And then how do they look after their own well-being? They're the 4 questions, same questions every week, obviously different answers for different people. And it's really interesting now to hear a lot of the men who are coming towards the end of their career say, yeah, I'm finally realizing that mental health is as important as our physical health, even though we've looked after our physical health for so many years and not done enough to look after our mental health. And I think that's fantastic to hear, people being honest, the fact that it is as important, and it definitely is. The stigma, I do think there's still a stigma there. And we speak about it in rugby. I'm finding I'm the one probably trying to change the page at the moment, and I'm one of the worst for it, as in we're not allowed to say we're injured on the field. Not allowed to say that at all. Like if you say, even if your shoulders come out of the socket, you run back in a defensive line, getting ready to make another tackle if needs be until you get a break in play. And then even after the game, somebody's saying to you, how's your shoulder? You're like, yeah, it's fine. And then you know it's not. But so we lie about our injuries all the time, and we've always been taught that way. And that is a way of professional sport or any sport, really. But then on a Monday morning or a Tuesday now, I'm saying to boys, oh, how are you doing? Everything okay? Asking them to open up and be honest about how they're feeling. But then they're not allowed to say about their injuries. So it's such a hard balance. We are definitely getting better. We're getting so much better, and we're so much more open. I remember through lockdown, putting like messages in the group saying, boys, I'm struggling motivation-wise today. How you all doing? All of a sudden you got 5-6 replies coming back saying, mate, me too. I'm really struggling with that. I remember when I signed up to be an ambassador for Havel, Welsh mental illness charity, signed up, and then like all the boys are reposting it, resharing it. And I was like, whoa, I'm quite surprised that they're willing to show that they think that's really important. And then over the next 3 months after that, I couldn't tell you how many conversations I had with boys coming up to me and saying, man, I'm so glad you're doing that. Like, I've seen this go on. I've had this go on. My brother's had this. My dad's had this. In my local rugby club, we struggled with this. So many stories. And I'm thinking, like, you could have spoke to me about this yesterday. Why didn't you speak about this then? Why not a year ago when you were really struggling? Why didn't you think you could come to me? I was there to support you. I'm your friend. I'm there. And it's like, how can we create this safe environment that men, boys, young men, old men feel that they're comfortable to come and say, yeah, I agree with you, or yeah, I'm struggling with this. Thank you for being there. Thank you for putting yourself out there. And the more safe spaces, and however we create them, the more safe spaces we can create, the better. And I do think that it is coming down. The judgment is completely different to the judgment we think is going on in our head. Like, we've all been there and gone, this is going to be so bad if I say it. I've had conversations with my mates and they've really opened out and they've gone, mate, thanks for just listening and not saying anything. Don't you think that's bad? And I'm like, mate, you've been completely honest. I think that's really powerful. I don't think it's bad. I think it's really powerful what you've just done. And I do think that it's hard when we're in that place. We do question how people's reactions are going to be. We start digging the hole even more, think it's going to be worse and worse, keep putting it off. And then it is harder to say it. But I promise you, those people around you, they want to be there for you. They love you, they like you, they want the best you. And I'm sure that some of the struggles that you're having, they've had anyway. And maybe they haven't been honest enough. And maybe you opening up is the reason they open up as well.
Thanks, Lloyd. Well said. Dan, from your experience, do you think there's still a stigma around, or what have you noticed over the years change?
I think there's been a change in the stigma through, if you look at SAMH or See Me up in Scotland, where they've challenged the stigma and really tried to push out the narrative that, one of the big hashtags is it's okay to not be okay. However, you create this environment where you can start to get men, or anybody for that matter, to feel, okay, this is something I can talk about. But then what? We say it's easy to go to the GP. Well, for men, that can be difficult. Also, we've got waiting times. So I think we've done a great job, or society's doing a great job in battling the stigma around mental health, to empower people to maybe seek some kind of support. But it's the nature of that support. So that's number one. I think the other thing for me, as a man who has a mental health disability, is I think sometimes as men, we can be our biggest barrier. We're very judgmental on ourselves, and trying to open up, you're going against that male narrative that we have, which is, stiff upper lip. We don't talk about it, keep it all in. For me, the biggest thing about was when I eventually went to therapy. Now, it took me years to get to that point that I would go and seek professional help, but mainly because of your own hidden barriers. I was one of the typical guys that didn't take medication, or wouldn't even take a headache tablet. So the act of going to see a GP to talk about my mental health it was a non-starter. When I eventually did, and then they sort of suggested going to talk to somebody about it, I was like, there's no chance. However, when I eventually did that, this idea of talking to a third party that had no kind of emotional connection in your life, who you could then talk to about what it was that was happening, was just, for me, a life changer. A life changer and a lifesaver, I would actually argue, because it gave me the opportunity to not be judgmental about myself, to accept that I had a disability, and to learn then that once you accepted that, to talk to other guys, especially, and you suddenly realize when you were talking to other guys, even on a very sort of top level situation, that once you mentioned it, they would start to engage. It's almost like you gave them permission And they were like, thank God he suffers as well. And, you know, very often somebody would say to me, oh God, yeah, I have issues with stress. And you think, gosh, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
So I think that's for me was one of the biggest drivers of BIA. And also, again, you know, we do the live coaching program, which gives you access to via text chat to a well-being coach. And for me, it's a way of getting men to at least have the opportunity to text chat to a professional, the same way that I did with a therapist, where they can talk in private, in confident, you know, with confidence about something with this person who's not really emotionally connected to them, that can give them coaching and maybe support advice via the phone. So that's been one of my biggest drivers, really my own experience of that, and how can we get it so that it can be opened out to more men. But yeah, the stigma is changing, absolutely, but it's what we then put in place, especially for men, to say, yes, I now realize I can get over the stigma, but where do I go for help?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think that's certainly my experience as well. There's been huge progress in relation to societal attitudes around mental wellness and mental ill health. But you're right, that's one part of the puzzle. And then we have to think about what comes after that.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to come on to this question because I think it's something that will be familiar to a lot of people joining us today. I'll just read it out for you. I'm normally really active and social, playing sports, meeting up with friends, and I'm really struggling at the moment and feeling very isolated. Any suggestion for things that I can do to keep me busy instead? So again, it's a really common response from people. They've had that adjustment in their life, so they've had to find a way to maybe do different things they're not familiar with, because they haven't got the option of playing sports as much as they may be used to. Lloyd, is this something you've come across in your support of other people?
Yeah, I think this has had a huge effect through lockdown. It's one of those negative side effects of the coronavirus, as in I don't think they've assessed the damage of what taking sport away, and taking, whether that's organized sport, whether it's going to the gym, whatever it is, with your social activity, with your physical activity together, is a huge benefit to everybody. And I've definitely seen the negative effects. I've also seen some of the positive effects. I've seen some of my friends who are PTs do some absolutely fantastic things online, and thought the community they've created together and brought together that would not normally be able to be accessible. Like a lot of my friends have said to me, oh, now we do a 6 o'clock in the morning club. A lot of the people who live in London wouldn't normally be able to make that, because they'd be normally on their way to work. All of a sudden now they're able to be physically active, albeit in their own houses. And like a couple of them have said, when I go back to classes in the gym, we're going to have to put them on Zoom as well. We're going to have to make them live, because so many people are finding it, giving that extra time to train, and which is fantastic. But the fact that Boris Johnson obviously announced last week that after this lockdown, that gyms will definitely be reopening. It's fantastic news. Community sport in Wales is starting to come back, albeit socially distanced, but still getting some sort of training back together with a intent of getting some leagues and games back up and running in January. Obviously, there was an announcement that 4,000 supporters would be allowed at the big stadiums across the UK, which is fantastic. And hopefully that starts bringing people's social and active lives back together. One thing I've realized through this lockdown and the last couple of weeks since the lockdown's been lifted in Wales is that I go for a walk now, and people are a lot more friendly. They pick their head up, they nod, they say hello. Whereas before I'd walk past and people keep their head down, don't even feel like you don't even get noticed as you're walking past. And I think this is a huge benefit for society, seeing how important those physical connections are. And I understand the moment it's been a struggle, but I think the fantastic news is that the way to lift our heads up is knowing that gyms be back open, community sport is going to be starting again, and classes can go back on in gyms, so you're able to meet people. And I know there's still restrictions in place and not everything's back to what we knew as normal pre this, but it is fantastic to see that we are realizing how important that physical activity is for not only our physical well-being, but our mental well-being and all-round well-being. So I think brilliant that we're bringing up this topic, and hopefully the news the last couple of weeks and the fact that people are adapting so well to this has been a huge encouragement for the person who's put this question out there as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, people are finding a way to keep occupied despite the fact that their options have been restricted a little bit more recently. So yeah, I've heard that as well, that people who maybe hadn't exercised are now starting to exercise because they can do so virtually. So yeah, and again, it's really great news that gyms and other leisure activities are opening again soon.
I think sorry, I was just going to die. I think that this, what Lloyd referred to there, is building the community, which I think is just fantastic. This idea that of a gym being a community as well, I think is just, especially for men, I can see that being a really powerful tool. And also this idea that it can carry on because of technology. So for still having access via Zoom as well, I think is a you know, from my perspective, is a great opportunity of then building your physical community. But then, as Lloyd said earlier, he's talking from Wales, I'm talking from Scotland, you're talking from down south. This idea you can build a community via the technology and still be able to reach out, I think there's some fantastic opportunities there, especially, you know, with men, and we know how men feel about their physical health, and we know that physical health is so connected to their mental well-being as well. So yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Question for you, Dan. I've seen through Brothers in Arms you can access the Thrive app. I've never used a mental health app before, so I don't know how it would work for me.
Okay, well, I think the first thing you do is it's free, by the way, just in case anybody's concerned. But you have to go through our website and you download it. It's really as simple as that. And the idea behind the app, and it's not a panacea. We're not trying to suggest that this is something going to suddenly replace all other support out there. To me, it's something that's part of the package of things that we're all doing. But with the app, it's about using it on a regular basis, especially as men. We're seeing a fantastic reaction from men in using it. And the idea is that you use it on a regular basis, like as you do going down the gym. And, you know, we tend to say and it's about building resilience as well. It's this idea of getting away from using something like a helpline when you're in crisis. We say use the app as something that you will do to maintain your mental fitness and build resilience, so that when things can get a bit tough, that you are able through the app to cope and to work on yourself. And as I say, we're finding a fantastic reaction. You know, we're getting about 300 on average downloads a week. You know, and then as part of that, we do the live coaching program, which has just been absolutely amazingly received. I think currently we've got about 451 men that are using that side of the app to actually communicate with a wellbeing coach who gives them advice on using the app, but also self-support and self-management. And the whole ethos of the app is about prevention through self-management. That's really what we're about. That's what we're trying to drive, is getting guys to use it regularly as they would do down a physical gym to work on their body, use this to work on your mental fitness, and not reach crisis point. Really, that's the idea. For me, you know, crisis for men is like throwing a life buoy into a ring when they're already drowning. You know, what we need to be doing is getting them, as Lloyd said earlier, at the very beginning or in the middle of that journey. So, yeah, we've proven the concept that men will use the technology and will use it to support themselves and their mental fitness. So, best thing to do, download it, try it, but don't rush into it going, I've got to use CBT straight away, or because you've got CBT module in there, you've got a muscle relaxation, you've got meditation. Meditation is used enormously by our users, but you know, we say couple of times a week, maybe 8 minutes a time. Our average is 9 minutes, and use it to support yourself.
Great, thanks, Dan. We always seem to run out of time.
I know, that's why I was trying to talk quickly.
I think we did last time, didn't we? We went over by about half an hour and still ran out of time. So yeah, I think we were aware we probably wouldn't get through everything today because, you know, these are large topics. But hopefully you're sort of finding some of them useful. I think we did just want to touch on this one as well because we did a webinar that focused specifically on fathers, new fathers, and the transition from not being a father to being a father. We did another webinar and we had a really a lot of response to that was really positive. So, and it's a question that's come in. I've recently become a new father. Although it's amazing, I've also struggled with this big change. Any tips for new dads? Well, I'm not a new father, but I've got two children who are young. And I think what we talked about on the webinar was to just hold on to the concept of being good enough, which is a really important concept to hold on to. And that's all you have to be, good enough. You don't have to.
You don't get a manual. You don't get a book. There's not a book you can go, you know, I'm a father of two girls. So not young, they're 15 and 20, but you know, I can remember that when Abigail, the eldest, was first born, and yeah, you don't get they don't give you a book to say this is how to do it. So I can understand, you know, how guys especially can feel that it's, you know, and can struggle for sure.
Yeah. I think if people are interested in that discussion, I think you can access it on our YouTube channel. We went through a whole bunch of sort of different scenarios and advice with it. So you can check that out as well. I think with the time we've got left, I'd just like to try and answer some of the questions that we've had in. And thank you so much for sending them in. There's one I just wanted to talk through, which isn't really a question, it's more of a statement. So I'm not going to say your name, but thank you for sending that in. I just wanted to read it to everyone else. Just wanted to say, I joined a local support group for men with depression a few years ago. I'm a bit of an introvert, so it was hard to open up at first, but I can't stress enough how much talking has helped. I've seen broken men come back from the brink. It saved my life and my marriage. I would definitely recommend joining a group if you can.
Fantastic.
Which I think is just, and thank you so much for sending that in.
Yeah, absolutely.
A great point to make about illustrating taking the risk to reach out. It's never as bad as you perhaps think it's going to be. So I just wanted to read that out for everyone else.
Brilliant.
I think the big thing for these groups as well is we've got to realize that we're able just to go and sit there. We don't always have to speak. And sometimes even listening helps.
Yeah.
And because we're not having enough of the honest, open conversations in public, we don't often realize that there might be so many other people going through the same things. And that almost in itself, even though you don't want to hear other people's problems and that they're struggling, it empowers you to make you feel that you're not you're not alone. There are other people having these difficulties, and I think from speaking to Luke Amber, who started Andy's Man Clubs, and like his thing that he always says is, don't feel like you have to come there and speak. You can go there and just listen as well, and you might after a couple of weeks feel more comfortable to speak. But you can also just go there and sit, and sometimes that gives you just as much relief at times as actually speaking yourself by just listening. So I think it's fantastic, and I think like without sharing names, like you said, I think it's fantastic that you're sharing your story, and other people are going to see that and think, let's give this a go, let's try this, and hopefully it helps many other people as well.
Yeah, I think there's a word, camaraderie. I think that idea that a group of men together, and yeah, I think it very much isn't. Luke is spot on. It's it's the fact you go to a welcoming place, and it's not about whether you need to talk. It's just enough to be there with your cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and just to be in that space and listen to other men, and suddenly realize ultimately that you are not alone. And I think that's got to be the greatest, as a guy, got to be the greatest feeling in the world when you think, you go, I am not on my own here. And yeah, absolutely. So well done, like whoever sent that is, he's spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. We've probably got time for one more question before we finish. I think we'll probably go for this one. For me, a lot of the problems amongst my friends is that there is no clear understanding as to what the symptoms of mental health issues look like in practice. It's all very well saying reach out if you're struggling, but for many, they aren't able to identify the issue as an issue until it's too late. Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to a lot of the things we were saying about just starting the conversation. I think you're right. Maybe family and friends don't always know what to look for. But you can tell them how you feel just by starting the conversation, so that you don't need to necessarily talk to somebody who has a lot of knowledge about mental health. I think, as you've heard us say, just sharing in itself can be really powerful. And if not for the reason that just sharing makes the person feel as though somebody's paying an interest and isn't judging them, and is actually interested in what they're saying. So I appreciate that, but I think, the advice is just start the conversation with someone. And that could be incredibly powerful in terms of you feeling better about reaching out to maybe a professional about your own mental well-being.
Yeah, I think there's something in when I was talking about the beauty of going to see somebody, a therapist or a counsellor, or a friend. I have to say, if the really good therapists create a non-judgmental space, and what they tend to do more often than that is they just listen. Then they're not a place that if you think they're just going to go and give you advice and try and solve the issue for you, that's not what it's about. It's about them giving you the space to talk. And I think sometimes when you get whatever is inside you out there, and you can hear yourself talking as well, and you can start to, and sometimes what you could have started talking about, that actually becomes not the main issue why you were there. It could be something else. So I think the act of talking to somebody, even though they may not have a deep understanding of what it is that you're on about, it's the fact that they're there for you to listen to what you're having to say. I think is quite important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're nearly out of time, so I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. We just want to try and summarize everything we've talked about today, really. I think what we've sort of discussed is that there's been a real change in relation to the way that men are beginning to talk about their mental well-being. And whilst there still is some stigma around, it's got a lot better. And if it is something you're struggling with, then help is available for you locally or nationally. So if you just search what's available locally and go along or make contact, it's probably not as bad as you think it is. And you've heard today that actually the support's been really important in terms of people coping a lot better. So I think the advice from me is it's definitely worth taking the time to go and speak to somebody if you are struggling. Please don't suffer in silence. And it's never as bad as perhaps you think it's going to be. Lloyd, can I come to you for some final comments?
Yeah, I'll go back to something I said at the start. I think it's fantastic that we're having this conversation. It shows that there is a huge change in it. And if we can carry on creating these safe environments for people to ask questions, to speak, the better it is for everybody. And for anybody who didn't have their questions answered there, please feel free to go across to Living Well with Lloyd Ashley on Instagram. Shoot the message across. I'll try and get back to you with either in the next couple of days and get some, if there's information or get anything else across to you. And I think the most important thing is that the more understanding we can have around each other, the more we can be there to check in, day out for people, the more we understand the changes in people. And we might not know what's going on. We might not understand everything, and that's not important. The most important thing is that people have support around them, and let's carry on creating that support, whether it's webinars, whether it's podcasts, whether it's being physically there in the room with people, whether it's doing like the Resilience for Rugby programs we have in rugby that we're starting to do now. Whatever it is, let's just try and create as many safe environments as we can for people, because we're going to feel a lot more open to speak about things. We're not going to feel like we're being personally judged, because we're not, because a lot of people want to be there for us. But let's just carry on the conversation, creating those spaces. And thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. Great.
Thank you, Lloyd. Dan, final words from you?
I think in light of the fact that from a Scottish perspective, that our suicide rates have gone up. So that's twice in 2018 and now 2019. I would Google Brothers in Arms Scotland. I'm not trying to push. We're a charity. What we offer is free. The digital technology that we offer is free. We work hard to make it freely available. Yes, it's for men in Scotland, but I'll tell you what we're not going to do. We're not going to stop men from Wales or from England coming along. Check out the site, check out the apps, and check out the resources. We do a lot of blog posts around how you can support yourself and how other people can support you. This is how we, as I always like to say, this is how we change things. We've got to make a change to, this 75% of all suicide is male. And for me, that's the mission. The mission is reducing that. So whatever we can do to help people out there, And again, we've got an email address. So if you want to ask any questions, fire right in there.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Okay, thanks everybody. There are more resources on the Brothers in Arms website, Lloyd's Instagram page, and the Thrive website. So please do take a look at those. You can also look at NHS Choices, and there's a lot of links there to mental health services. You can search what's available locally as well. So I'd just like to end by saying thank you so much for your participation. I hope you found it useful.
See
you again soon.